to share her story. Sorrel is a nationally renowned patient safety advocate, author, and the president and co-founder of the Josie King Foundation. In 2001, Sorrel's daughter, Josie, died as a result of medical errors. She was determined to honor Josie's memory, and Sorrel and her husband created the Josie King Foundation. Setting out to prevent patients from being harmed or killed by medical errors, Sorrel entered a world unknown to her, the healthcare industry. Sorrel started the Josie King Foundation and wrote a novel about her experience entitled Josie's Story, a mother's inspiring crusade to make medical care safe. As a public speaker, Sorrel travels the country spreading her message to hundreds of organizations, reaching thousands of healthcare professionals over the years. Josie's story will inspire change and help us create a better and safer healthcare system for us all. Again, we're honored to have Sorrel as our keynote speaker for our Patient Safety Week, where she will share her family-centered approaches to patient safety. Thank you, Sorrel.
Thank you. Thank you, Amy. It's really such an honor to be with all of you guys today. And I so look forward to the day. I never thought I would say this, but I can't wait for the day when I hop on an airplane and fly across the country to do another speak at another hospital. It's been a long time, and it's made me realize how much I appreciated the honor of being in hospitals like UCSF over all the years that I was lucky enough to have that. But it's nice to see faces on the screen, and happy Patient Safety Week. And I kind of just also want to take this opportunity to thank all of you, my gosh, for everything you've been through the past 2 years. I'm on the outside of the bubble looking in, and I've always been impressed and been in awe of everything you all do. And during COVID, I was more impressed and more in awe of everything you guys do for people like me, for your patients, and for their families. I know it's been a slog. I know it's been hard. I know you're tired. I know you're burnout. Please, please don't quit your job and decide you're going to go be a caterer or something, because I'm sure that would be much less stressful. But thanks, you guys, for everything. And thank you for your patient safety work. And what we're really here today just to talk about patient safety. And my goal today is to have you all hopefully sit back and relax for the next 40 minutes while I tell a story. And hopefully this story will inspire you to take your patient safety efforts to the next level. Hopefully this story will inspire you to be re-energized and to just continue your amazing, amazing work. I have been telling this story for a long, long time. And there have been times over all these years where I have told myself that maybe it's time to take a break. Maybe I could do something else. It's been 20 years since I've been traveling around telling this story. But every time I get on that airplane to fly across the country to visit another hospital or give another talk at a patient safety conference or a nursing school or a medical school, and every time I say to myself, this is the last time I'm doing this, I come home at the end of the day and I look at the emails that trickle in from people who were in that audience that day, a nurse or a doctor, and they say, I heard you tell Josie's story today. Her story has inspired me as a nurse to never be afraid to speak up. Her story has inspired me as a doctor to listen to the patient, listen to the family member, listen to each other. So it's because of that feedback, because of those emails, because of those comments over all these years, that is why I continue to travel around the country or sit in my little office and tell this story again. So you all sit back. And one other thing I've learned throughout all these years is that stories make a difference. Stories can inspire us in ways that sometimes data and PowerPoint presentations and statistics can't inspire us. Stories can move us as individuals, and stories can move us as an organization. That's my goal today, is to help you all take all of the amazing work you're doing to that next level. So Josie was 18 months old when she was admitted to Johns Hopkins after suffering from 1st and 2nd degree burns from climbing into a hot bath. My husband and I were constantly by her side. We bonded with the nurses. We bonded with the doctors. Neither one of us had spent much time in a hospital before. But as we were at Hopkins looking around and bonding with the doctors and the nurses, we felt like we were witnessing human beings at their very best. These doctors, these nurses, they were amazing. They became our friends. And I remember every morning I would walk down to the cafeteria at Hopkins, and I would pick up some muffins for the nurses on duty. And I would walk by the big, huge, giant, blown up posters lining the wall, one after the other. U.S. News, World Report, ranking Johns Hopkins one of the top hospitals in the country, poster after poster after poster. And every morning I would just stand in the hallway and look at these posters lining the wall. And I would watch these doctors and these nurses racing up and down the hallway. And I would say to myself, thank God we're at Johns Hopkins. These doctors, these nurses, they are the best. Josie was healing beautifully. She was doing great. We were being moved down to the step down unit, and Josie and I were in an elevator with one of the nurses. And I said to the nurse in the elevator, I said, is it okay if we just stay in the PICU? Because we know everyone and I feel more comfortable and I like the nurse patient ratio, and we'll just keep our room if that's okay. And the nurse, they all called me Mom. And she said, Mom, when you're in the hospital, you don't get to choose which floor you're going to be on or which unit you're going to be in. She said, the step down unit, it's a good thing. It means you're going home soon. You'll be fine. So as Josie and I were in the step down unit, I began noticing that she seemed thirsty. And whenever anyone sort of walked by with a drink, she would kind of reach out for it. And I said to the nurse on duty, I said, can Josie need something to drink? Does she need any IV fluids? She seems really thirsty. Josie had an upset stomach the day before, and the nurse said, let's keep her stomach settled. She handed me a bowl of ice chips, and she said, let's just feed her ice chips today. So all day throughout the day, I fed Josie the ice chips. That afternoon, Josie's doctor, Chuck Patus, came and looked at Josie and said, she looks great. You guys can go home in 2 days. Let's take out her central line. She doesn't need it. The only reason she would need it would be if she needed some sort of medication quickly, and that's not going to happen. And really, it's just a place where an infection could occur. So Dr. Patus took Josie's central line out. And it was such a great feeling just to be able to scoop her up into my arms and walk down to the cafeteria and say goodbye to my nurse friends. It was a great feeling. That evening, a nurse and I gave Josie a bath in the bathtub. And I thought it was strange. As she was in the bathtub, she was just sucking furiously on a washcloth. We put her in bed that night, and I looked at her and something just didn't seem right to me. She looked thin. Her coloring didn't look right. Her eyes, she looked tired. She looked lethargic. I asked the nurse on duty, I said, I think we need to call Chuck Patus. I think someone needs to come take a look at Josie. Something's not right. The nurse said, she's fine. Her stats are fine. And I said, can someone else look at her? Something's not right. So another nurse came and looked at Josie and said the same thing. They said, Sorrel, go on home, get some sleep, get some rest. Don't worry. Sometimes kids get tired, they get lethargic when they've been in the hospital. She's fine. So I went home that night. I called 2 times throughout the night to check on Josie. Each time I was told that she was fine. I came in the next morning at 5:30 with my muffins for the nurses. And I walked into her room and I looked at her, and I went out into the hallway and I waved at the team. They were beginning their rounds. And I waved to them and I said, "Can you come see Josie? Something doesn't seem right." And they said, "Mom, we'll be there in a little bit. We've got some other patients ahead of you." And I'd always been the mother who wanted to be the low maintenance mother. I never wanted to ask too many questions. I never wanted to be in the way. I never wanted to be demanding. I always wanted to show appreciation. I wanted to be a part of the team. I wanted to be helpful. I just wanted them to like me so that they would take special care of Josie. But that morning when they told me to wait my turn, I screamed back at them and I said, "No, please, you've got to come now." And they came and they looked at her and I said, "I know she's thirsty. I know she needs something to drink." They gave her some Gatorade. They gave her a shot of Narcan. She was looking better. She was looking alert. She was looking around. She was looking so much better. They gave her more Gatorade. And I asked her doctor, Chuck Patis, I said, "Chuck, Josie's not going to get that 1 o'clock dose of methadone today, is she? I mean, she's not in pain. We're going home day after tomorrow. Why would she be getting a narcotic after this?" And Chuck Patis had given a verbal order for Josie to not receive the 1 o'clock dose of methadone. At 1 o'clock, a nurse came over with a syringe of methadone, and I said to the nurse, "Josie's not supposed to get that." And the nurse said, "The orders have been changed." So something that I have to live with for the rest of my life. I stood there and I thought to myself, do I knock the methadone out of this nurse's hand and run out into the hallway and scream for help? Or do I say to myself, I'm at one of the best hospitals in the country. These doctors, these nurses, they are smarter than I am. They've obviously met, they've had a meeting, they have decided together as a team, these experts, for scientific reasons, for reasons that are above my head, that the best thing for Josie would be to receive the 1 o'clock dose of methadone. So I stood aside and I watched the nurse give Josie the methadone. The next time I looked back at Josie, she appeared to be asleep, and I tried to wake her up and she would not wake up. The nurse came over, nurses and doctors came rushing into her room with metal trays and metal carts, and they surrounded her bed, and it was complete and utter chaos in the room. They put me out into the hallway and I looked through the window. They put me in a room with a chaplain. The next time I saw Josie, they took me back up into the PICU, and I walked into her room, and she was in the bed, surrounded by machines, hooked up. Every part of her body was hooked up to a machine. Doctors and the nurses stood by her bed, and I walked into that room, and they could hardly look at me. And I said to them, with all of the strength I could gather, I said to them, I know everything is going to be okay. I'm here to help. Whatever you need, whatever it takes, we will do it. If you need us to fly in a specialist from around the world, we will do it. If you need us to donate one of our organs, we will do it. If you need us to do a transplant, whatever it takes, we will do it, whatever it costs. And I said, you did this to her. Now you have to fix her. Josie's siblings are at home right now. preparing for the welcome home party day after tomorrow. They told me that we needed to pray. The next morning, a team of neurologists came and examined Josie. They told my husband and I that she had no brainstem function. She would not survive. And I said to the neurologist, I said, well, we're going to wait for the miracle. Miracles happen every day in hospitals. We are going to wait for a miracle. I just talked to another mother. She told me she had a miracle. We will wait for the miracle. They told me that there would be no miracle, that she was completely brain dead. It was just, her organs were shutting down, and it was just a question of time before everything shut down. So that afternoon, Josie's siblings, Jack, Relly, and Eva, were brought down to the hospital. We said goodbye to Josie, and she was taken off of life support. So within 24 hours, we had gone from planning a welcome home celebration to planning a funeral. Our lives, our world were completely turned upside down. Two new raw emotions had completely overpowered us. One was grief, and the other was the most inexplainable, burning, powerful anger you could ever possibly imagine. The thing with Josie's death, like so many deaths from medical errors, is that she did not die from a doctor's mistake. She did not die from a nurse's mistake. She did not die from a misplaced decimal point or an incorrect medication. She died from something so simple, so basic, that for the days and the weeks and the months after she died, I would pace up and down the hallways of my house, shaking my head over and over again, saying to myself, how could this have happened? I saw the breakdown happening every step of the way. I could have prevented it. She died from a breakdown in communication. She died from a breakdown in the system. What if the residents had noticed that her weight had dropped significantly in 24 hours? What if she had not had been given the methadone? What if she had been given water? What if there had been patient safety programs in place? What if, and this is something I learned much later, what if those nurses who actually had been concerned and had actually gone up the chain of command to express their concern to the pain management team, what if they had tried a little bit harder to be heard? What if the pain management team had tried a little bit harder to hear what it was the nurses were trying to say? What if there had been a rapid response team in place? What if someone had taken their eyes off of their computer screen and off of their clipboards and looked at the patient lying in the bed? What if someone had listened to the mother? I think if just one of those things had happened, that maybe Josie would be alive today. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that the Joint Commission states that over 75% of all sentinel events are due to a breakdown in communication. I think about that one statistic every day that I visit another hospital to tell this story again. And over all these years, I've been thinking the same thing all the time. This should be so easy. All we need to do is listen to each other, communicate, improve teamwork, listen to the patient, listen to the family, work together. But what I've been learned and what I've been told over all these years and what I've learned is that what we're talking about is culture. And changing the culture in the healthcare industry is a very difficult thing to do. A week or so after Josie died, the head of the Children's Center, a man by the name of Dr. George Dover, came to our house, and he sat down with Tony and with me. And he said to us, he said, this should never have happened. We are sorry. We are devastated. We are going to fix these problems. This will never happen again. We have an outside team investigating what went wrong. We are going to get to the bottom of this. We are sorry. And we said, thank you very much. You will be hearing from our lawyers. We interviewed teams of lawyers from Washington, D.C. up to Baltimore, Maryland. Our goal was to find and hire the most powerful law firm we could find to destroy Johns Hopkins. We were out to take them down brick by brick. I liked the Washington, D.C. firm because they were big and they were powerful, and they had a big, huge conference room with a big, huge conference table, and they all listened to us tell the story, and they took their notes and they had their meetings. And I knew that if we chose that law firm, I knew that it would be a bloodbath, which was exactly what I wanted. But we ended up choosing a local lawyer here in Baltimore. His name was Paul Beckman. I didn't like him much in the beginning. His office was small, and he had pictures of golf courses on the walls of his office. And I kept wondering where all the degrees and the diplomas and the awards. And the first thing he said to us when we sat down to talk to him was how much he enjoyed playing golf with Rick Kidwell, who was the risk manager at Johns Hopkins. So I thought to myself, how is this golfing buddy of Rick Kidwell's Johns Hopkins? How and why would he destroy this hospital for us? So every few weeks I would pick up the phone and I would call Paul Beckman, and I would say, Paul, if you don't do your job, then I will do it for you. I have the Baltimore Sun, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, USA Today. I had the media, the Today Show. I had the media lined up, ready to go. I will destroy Johns Hopkins by myself through the media. And he said, Sorrell, if you do that now, it will be one sad story in tomorrow's news, and then it will be forgotten forever. He said, let me do my job, and then together we will share this story. So for 7 months or 8 months, I kept my mouth shut. 7 months later, Johns Hopkins invited us down to their conference room with their big conference table with all their stacks of paper from their big, huge investigation, with their team on one side of the table, and then me and Paul Beckman, our lawyer, and Tony sitting across the other side of the table. And they offered us a settlement. They offered us money. And I have to tell you, the thought of accepting their money for the death of our daughter was almost as disgusting and as despicable as them offering it to us. We felt that if we were to accept the money, we would be accepting what they had done. We would be letting them off the hook, and that was too easy a way out for Johns Hopkins. So weeks went by, and we did not sign the papers. Finally, our lawyer, Paul Beckman, came over, and he sat down with us. And he said, if you walk away from this money will get sucked up into the insurance company, and nothing will become of it. He said, or you can sign the papers, you can take the money, you can use the money to do something for Josie. Money is power. You can do something for Josie, you can do something for other children. And the light bulb went off in our heads. And we said, yes, let's give the money to the Ronald McDonald House. Let's give the money to kids who have cancer. Let's give the money to the new children's center. We knew we wanted to do something with sick children and hospitals. But there was a question that kept going in the back of my mind, and I just could not figure out the answer to the question. So the day we signed the papers, I picked up the phone and I called Rick Kidwell at Johns Hopkins. And I said, Rick, this is Sorrell. I just wanted to ask you a question. And he said, Mrs. King, you can't be contacting me. Only your lawyer should be contacting me. And I said, well, Rick, we just signed the papers. It's all over. And he put me on hold, and he, well, he called Paul Beckman to talk about this. And then he came back to me on the other line with a complete personality transformation. And I said to him, I said, Rick, Josie's death from medical errors was a fluke, right? It was, people don't die from medical errors like that. It was a rare occurrence. It was a strike of lightning, right? He said, Sorrel, 98,000 patients die every year from medical errors. It's the fourth leading cause of death in the country. It's like a jumbo jet crashing every day. And I said, Rick, I'm fairly educated. I never knew this. I've never heard of this. And he said, people don't talk about it. Hospitals don't talk about it. Doctors and nurses don't talk about it. Patients and families don't talk about it because they're in the middle of a lawsuit, or they're too grief-stricken, or they're dead. People don't talk about this issue. And I said, well, Rick, then I will talk about it. I will talk about it. I will tell every single person that I meet what you and your hospital did to my daughter. I'm going to talk about it. And he sort of paused, and he said, you know, you should talk about it. In fact, why don't you come down and talk about it at Grand Rounds here at Hopkins in October? You should talk about it. You should present. You should tell this story. And of course, I said, well, Rick, obviously I'm unstable. Obviously, that was more of a threat. Obviously, I will not be doing Grand Rounds. And he said, you know, Sorrel, there are people at this hospital that don't even know that this happened. And he said, they don't want to hear it from me, the risk manager, anymore. They need to hear it from the family, from the patient. So long story short, fast forward, after that phone conversation with Rick Kidwell, we knew exactly what we were going to do with the money. We were going to create a foundation. We were going to call it the Josie King Foundation. Our mission was to prevent patients and families from being harmed or killed by medical errors. And there I sat with my little mission statement on my index card and wondering to myself, how will I ever make a difference? I don't know a single person in the healthcare industry. I don't know a thing about the healthcare industry. A friend of mine told me about a doctor by the name of Peter Pronovost, who I'm sure is a familiar name to all of you. Peter Pronovost back then, 20 years ago, was and still is an anesthesiologist who was passionate about patient safety. Since Josie's death, his star has risen. He's become one of the world's most recognizable people on the patient safety front. But back then, he was just passionate about this. He and I talked on the phone. He came over and he said, Sorrel, why don't I come over to your house and talk to you and Tony? I'll never forget the day he rang the doorbell. I opened the door, and for those of you that know what Peter looks like he's 23 years old. And I looked at him and I said, oh, I'm so sorry. I thought you were older. I needed an older, more experienced person to work with me. He convinced me that he and I were exactly the same age. He came in, he sat down, he talked to us about something called CUSP, Comprehensive Unit-Based Safety Program. It was about improving communication. It was about improving teamwork. It was about coming to work every single day, saying to ourselves, how will the next patient be harmed? It was about finding all of the little patient safety issues, fixing those issues before those issues turn into incidents and cause death. It was about preventing the holes in the Swiss cheese from lining up. It was about culture. And we said to Peter, Peter, we understand this. We believe in this. We get this. What do you need? How much money do you want? We gave a pile of money back to Johns Hopkins. We created 2 Josie King pediatric patient safety programs on the 2 floors where Josie had been cared for. And that was the beginning of the Josie King Foundation making a tiny little difference. Not long after setting that up, Rick Kidwell followed through with his invitation to have me come speak at Grand Rounds at Johns Hopkins in October. And I stood behind that podium in the famous wood-paneled Herd Hall, and there was standing room only. And some of the very doctors and nurses who had taken care of Josie were sitting right there in front of me. And as much as I wanted to reach out to them and lash out at them and tell them how angry I was and how sad I was, I knew that if I told them how I really felt, that they would walk out of the room shaking their heads, saying that poor woman has completely lost her mind. Instead, I reached out to them and said, let's work together. Can we create patient safety programs together? Can we share this story together? Can we work with other hospitals? Because there is one thing that I do know about the healthcare industry. The one thing that I do know is that Johns Hopkins is the best. And maybe if Johns Hopkins does something, then maybe all of the other hospitals from all around the country will look to see what the God Almighty Johns Hopkins is doing. And maybe they will do the same thing. Not long after that talk at Grand Rounds, Peter came to me and he said, Sorrel, come with me to Boston and present at an IHI conference. And I said, Peter, I can't go with you to Boston. I don't even know what IHI stands for. He said, Institute for Healthcare Improvement. There will be 300 doctors, 300 nurses from all around the country there. He said, this is your one chance to get Josie's story beyond the 4 walls of Johns Hopkins. So I went with Peter to Boston and I shared the story, and a doctor happened to be in the back of the room and he filmed it. I came home that night and there, all those little emails that I told you about earlier started trickling in. I'm a nurse and I heard you tell Josie's story. I'm from Akron Children's Hospital. Do you have a DVD? Do you have a video? Do you have something, a transcript? I want to take your story back to my hospital. I want to share your story. I'm a doctor from Baptist Health in Miami. I heard you tell Josie's story. Do you have a transcript? Do you have a video? I want to take your message. I want to take your story back to my hospital. And of course I said, I don't have transcripts and I don't have videos. I just have my index cards and I can't help you people. Not long after that, a big box arrived in the mail, and in the big box were 20 DVDs. And some of you may remember what a VHS, 20 VHS videos titled Josie's Story. And the person that sent them said, Sorrel, send this to any hospital that wants them. And in return, ask for a donation for the foundation. And I said, a donation for the foundation, and would it be $15 or $12 for shipping and handling? He said, Sorrel, there's something you need to know about the healthcare industry. The healthcare industry spends a lot of money on educational videos. Ask for a donation of $250. This DVD has been translated into 3 different languages. This DVD has been shipped all over the world. This DVD is being used in nursing schools, medical schools, the aviation industry is using it, law schools are using it, hospitals are using it for training programs. This DVD has brought in hundreds and thousands of dollars into the Josie King Foundation. The money comes in from the healthcare industry and it goes right back out into the healthcare industry in the forms of some projects and programs that I will talk about in a few minutes. What this DVD has taught me over all these years is that sometimes it takes just that real life story. Sometimes it takes a story to change the direction of that ship. The DVD has been, it's been an amazing program. Now, so from the DVD, and I'm going to talk about just a couple of other programs. a few years ago, maybe 7 or so years ago, I was in Orlando at the IHI annual patient safety conference. It was the year that Don Berwick kicked off the Save 100,000 Lives campaign. When I was there, someone said, Don wants to meet with you. Don asked me to join him up on stage that next morning where he was going to kick off this campaign. And so I sat with him on stage with 6 or 7 other healthcare industry leaders, of course, feeling very uncomfortable being up there amongst these experts. And I sat in that chair and I listened to Don as he reached out to this audience of over 5,000 healthcare providers from all around the world. And he was so brilliant and he was so passionate and so charismatic as he spoke to this audience about how together they were going to partner to prevent 100,000 patients from dying of medical errors. And I could feel the beginning of a movement. And then he started talking about the projects and the programs, most of which were over my head. But then he talked about something called a rapid response team, a team of fresh eyes that come to the bedside when that nurse or that doctor calls that team, a team of people that come to the bedside who have not been looking at the patient 24/7. They look at the patient and they come up with an answer to what's happening. And as I sat there listening to him talk about a rapid response team, I realized for the first time in the years since Josie had died that maybe this could have saved her. Don passed the microphone to each of the people on stage and they each stood up and they said, we endorse this campaign. And then he passed the microphone to me. And I said, Don, can a family member, could we ever call a rapid response team? And I didn't really hand him the microphone back. I held on to it and I stepped up to the front of that stage. And I said to the 5,000 people in that room, I said, and they all knew Josie's story. And I said, I would have called 3 times. I would have called the night I put her to bed. I would have called the morning I walked into her room. And I would have called the minute the nurse walked in with the methadone. I would have called a rapid response team 3 times. And the team would have come and they would have looked at her and they would have said, that little girl is thirsty. She needs IV fluids. And I bet she'd be alive today. And then I said to that audience of 5,000, I said, it's not about me and the Josie King Foundation. It's not about me and Josie's story anymore. It's about all of the other patients and all of the other families that I've been talking to over all these years. And they keep telling me the same thing, that same common thread, that they didn't listen common thread. There was a little bit of clapping in the audience, and it was not an applause kind of clapping. It was a we hear you kind of clapping. Long story short, fast forward a few weeks after that, I got a call from Tammy Merriman, University of Pittsburgh Medical Center. And she said, Sorrel, we are going to create a patient family activated rapid response team. We want you and the foundation to be a part of it. I went to Pittsburgh. I sat there with them. We put this thing together. I helped fund it. We kicked it off a year later. They decided that Children's Hospital would implement this. Of course, I can never say no to a children's hospital. So I gave them the foundation gave them money to fund that. A year after that, UPMC decided that all 12 hospitals would implement they call it Condition H. And I said, you all have to get your own money. I can't give you any more money. And they did. The night before the big kickoff, I had dinner with a group of nurses, and I love having dinner with nurses because they tell me the real scoop on everything. And I said, how is it? How's it going? And they said, we love it. We've got the doctors on board. It's all really great, but we're a little bummed because we haven't had the big event. And I said, what do you mean? What's the big event? They said the We Saved a Life big event. So all night that night, I thought about the big event. And the next morning in front of the 12 hospitals, when I was giving a little speech, I asked them about the big event. And I said, who cares about the big event? Don't worry about the big event. In Josie's case, there would have been no big event. They would have just said, she's thirsty. She needs fluids. I believe that the program like this is sort of a safety net, and I'm not one to walk into any organization and say, this is what you should do, but I am one to say, this is something to think about. And something like this will never work unless the culture is 100% ready, unless every doctor, unless every nurse is behind it. Then the culture is ready. Then you do it like you mean it. It's been a real honor to work with so many hospitals around the country on a program like this. It's something I very much believe in. I know I'm looking at the clock. It's 3:41. I know I'm supposed to talk for 40 minutes, but I think I might have a few more minutes unless one of you guys buzzes me or beeps me and tells me to wrap it up. But I just want to talk about one or two other maybe I'll just talk about one other program and then I'll wrap it up really fast. All of these programs are simple. All of these are basic. All of these are a direct result from Josie's death. All of these are being used in hospitals around the country. Sometimes friends or people will say, Sorrel, my father is going into the hospital. What do I do? And I say, I give them a yellow legal pad and I say, write down everything and don't leave the bedside and keep track of everything. And then I realized the Josie King Foundation that we needed to create a book for patients and families when they're in the hospital. We created this beautiful green little care journal. It's got, steps, parking place. Every single night I lost where I couldn't remember where my car was parked in downtown Baltimore, which was not a good thing. Medical team on duty, write the names of the amazing doctors and nurses who are taking care of us. Daily goals. You guys have your daily goals. What are our daily goals? Medication, surgeries, procedures, tests, diet. Most important questions to ask. My team, they're coming on rounds. I have 3 questions. I'm going to write them down. And I have to pick up a gallon of milk on the way home. I printed 10,000 of these and I went and sat down with a group of nurses and I said, don't you love this? Isn't this wonderful? And they all looked at me with blank expressions. And I said, how can you not like this? And they said, Sorrel, sometimes we feel uncomfortable when we see a patient or a family member in the room taking notes. We see it as a potential documentation for a lawsuit. And I said, well, what do you do when your loved one's in the hospital? And they said, well, we write everything down. What I realized was that this could not come from me in the foundation to that patient and family. This had to come from the hospital, from the doctors, from the nurses to the patient and the family. Hospitals have partnered with us from all around the country. They put their own label right here, University of Kansas Hospital. Welcome to the University of Kansas University. This is a gift from us to you. We encourage you to partner with us in your care. We encourage you to speak up. We encourage you to ask questions. We encourage you to be a part of our team. This is the 30-day. This is the 7-day. I know you hospitals like us in and out in under 7 days. The Josie King Foundation created an app to help patients and family members. This is all just patient family-centered care kind of stuff. This has been a wonderful, wonderful program. And what this has also taught me is that, these are all just simple little notebooks, but more importantly than what they physically are is what they are sort of emotionally, which is that bridge to help bridge the disconnect between the doctors and the nurses and the family. We are that family, that patient in that room scared out of our mind. But when you hand us this book and this little notebook, it says to us that you want us to be a part of your team. So it's been a wonderful project. I think I need to wrap it up. I do have a few more things that I wanted to talk about, but I think I should wrap it up because I'm over my time. So in this story, there are lots of threads. The why me thread, the why Josie thread, the anger thread, the grief thread, the search for religion thread, lots and lots of threads throughout all of this. But I think the most important thread for me, and the most important thread, if there's only one thing you're going to take from this story, from this session, is that thread of when something bad happens to us, you have to sit in it, and it might be divorce, it might be death, it might be cancer, it just might be a bad day on the job. But when it happens to us, no matter how big it is, no matter how small it is, you have to sit and stew in it and rot in it for a little bit. But if you can turn it around to somehow help someone else, then it actually makes you feel better. And if you can keep turning it around slowly, slowly, slowly to help other people, to use that bad thing that happened to you to help someone else, it makes you feel better. So I ask that you all in your work at UCSF, your daily work, when you find the stuff that could be better, the stuff that could be fixed, instead of saying, that's not going to hurt anyone, that's not my job to fix that, we can't afford to fix that, I don't have time to fix that, someone else will fix that. I ask that you search out and you find those weak links, those little patient safety issues, and you look at them and you talk about them and you learn from them and you fix them. Because if we can continue to have that sort of thinking, then things will get fixed and there will be fewer people like Josie King out there or like me out there, and hospitals will be safer. I think that's it for me, you guys. I think we're gonna do like a Q&A or something. But again, I thank you for letting me be a part of your day. And oh, it's so nice to see people. It's so awkward talking into a screen where I'm just really looking at myself. But thanks you guys for letting me be a part of your day and your patient safety week.
Sorrel, thank you. On behalf of all of UCSF Health, we really want to thank you for sharing Josie's story, and your honesty in sharing those experiences is inspiring and very powerful to all of us here, not just as healthcare providers, but more importantly, as family members of patients. And so there are, in fact, a number of questions in the Q&A. So what I'll do is just start off by asking the first one, and maybe we can go from there. So the first attendee asked, said that after watching you and hearing Josie's story for the past 2 decades, I would love to hear your perspective on the efforts of, hold on, that just disappeared from my screen for just a second. I want to honor that particular question. Okay. I'll just change that one. Yeah. Okay. So it went to the answer section. Yes, I can find it. Switched. Yes, it switched to the answer question. All right. We can do this on Zoom. Excellent. So after watching you and hearing Josie's story for the past 2 decades, I would love to hear your perspective on the efforts of patient safety work since then, but how to remain hopeful that we can fix this as sustainment continues to haunt even the UCSFs and Johns Hopkins of the world. What does someone who's had so much influence in your advocacy work, what can you say to all of us in healthcare today?
Well, so COVID aside, I haven't been going into the hospitals much the past 2 years, obviously for obvious reasons. But, you look at the data and you look at the statistics of, the past few years, and the data and the statistics will say, oh, there are more medical errors now than there were before when the IOM report came out, and things are worse. And I don't get distracted by that. And I think part of that's because we're talking about these things, we're measuring these things. It's because of that, I think. What matters to me most is that the whole culture of it. I mean, I still think we have a really, really long way to go. There's a lot of work to go, but I think, a couple of years ago, I realized I'm hitting cross generations now. When I first started this 21 years ago or 20 years ago, the nurses that I was speaking to now are like grandmothers, and now their daughters are nurses, and now those granddaughters are nursing students. So I have had a number of times where I've hit 3 generations. So for me, it's about that continuing to try to hammer in and bond, connect with that next generation, those kids who are in nursing school now, encouraging those high school students to choose a career in the healthcare industry. I'm kind of going down a bunny rabbit hole, not exactly answering the question, but I feel hopeful for the future. I think we've come a long, long way. 20 years ago, 25 years ago, people weren't talking about this. Mm-hmm. But we have a lot of work to do, and sort of my focus is really on the next generation. I think people's frame of minds are different now from how it was a generation ago or 20 years.
That's an important message. How do we teach the next generation, right? Yeah. These lessons that we've learned. Thank you. The next question comes from one of our attendees who says, thank you for sharing your story. Can you comment on how communication advocacy by caregivers may be influenced by differences in race, ethnicity, language, or financial resources? How can we ensure that our minoritized caregivers have a stronger voice in our culture of safety?
Yeah, great question. There's so many sort of hierarchies, right, in the world, you guys. Again, I'm not an expert. You guys can answer this question way better than I can. So you should probably answer this. But from my perspective, from what I've seen with other hospitals, that there are these hierarchies. You have the doctor, the nurse, and then you throw in everything else that you just mentioned, which makes it even more complicated. And like I just remember being at one hospital a couple of years ago, and there was a group of nurses on rounds. The older nurse, the one that's the matriarch of the nurses, and then some younger nurses. And that older nurse, they were talking about a patient. And that older nurse looked at each of those younger nurses and said, Susie, can you tell me what you think about the situation? Tom, can you tell me what you think of this situation? It just, to me, takes that other person, the leader, to go through every single one of those people to make sure that if they don't feel like they have a voice and if they don't feel comfortable speaking up, that someone will draw that voice, get that person to speak up and share their thoughts. I mean, that's just a stupid, simple, dumb little example, but I do feel like it's like we can all make a little bit of a difference by bringing out that one person who maybe doesn't have the confidence to speak up,
Right. It goes back to your original message, right, of psychological safety and feeling, comfortable to speak up when we feel like there's something that needs to be addressed. I think that at UCSF, we've been known throughout the country for many years for our work in diversity, equity, inclusion, and also health equity. And so towards that end, there's been a lot of work addressed on the caregiver level, for our healthcare providers in looking at how we can ensure equity, among how we provide care and what our understanding of our patient preferences are. And there's still a lot more to do, as all healthcare systems have. But I think that that's something that we are committed to. So I really want to thank that attendee for asking that question. So really, again, it goes back to our core mission. The next question says, what are your thoughts on the systems across the U.S. leaning to personal accountability with improvement on these issues to prevent those holes that you mentioned, the Swiss cheese holes? COVID showed our huge healthcare cracks and a frontline feeling as if they are not able to provide the care they want to do. And also, I guess, speaking to external system forces that not fixing system issues based on fiscal barriers, et cetera.
I feel like that question is a question for me, but to really have you answer that. But I mean, I think you're more capable of answering that than I am, as far as like the fiscal barriers and stuff. But here's one thing. Here's what I think really quickly. I was a mother with zero background in the healthcare industry, zero education. I knew nothing about it. So somehow I was able to make a little bit of a difference. You know what I mean? So I don't think a little bit of the difference that I made wasn't millions and millions of dollars. I wasn't like, it was just the simplicity of going through to talk to every single person, every single hospital, every single doctor, every single nurse, to somehow do what I could to inspire them to be better caregivers. So sometimes when I think about this stuff, I'm like, does it have to be rocket science? Do we have to have millions and millions of dollars? Do these hospitals have to be flying in consultants from all of the country to help them figure out their problems? Sometimes, because I live in my little pretend bubble of this world is so simple, sometimes I just think if the hospital's leadership just looks within and asks their nurses and their doctors or whoever, like, how can we make the culture better? then just listen to each other and work together. It doesn't sometimes have to be so complicated, but I am naive because I don't live the world that you guys are living. But Amy, you can do a better job answering that question. But that's my little answer to the little bubble that I live in.
Yeah. Sarah, thanks. I think you did a pretty good job in answering that question. And given that we still have 4 more questions to get through, what I might do is just, I'll move on to the next few questions in the interest of time. Thank you for that. I just wanted to give you a shout out that Amy Himes says, thank you, Sorrel. I have said for a long time that data doesn't tell stories, patients tell stories. We need to listen. So thank you, Amy, for that. There's another question by Lewis who says, how do you advise families to respond when they observe that doctors are not listening to each other or don't trust each other? Even as a physician myself, addressing this problem on behalf of a family member can be very difficult. I'm wondering how non-medical people can do this effectively, especially from a parent perspective.
Yeah. I think again, you all in the healthcare industry, I think it's your job to say to those parents, hey, do you have a question? You should write this down, or, I mean, just being that extra person that goes that extra step to say to that parent, that mother, that patient in the bed, just putting the empathy piece of it, putting yourself in their shoes. As far as how do you get doctors to work better and be better communicators, and I mean, again, that's something internally that you all, I feel like this in medical schools and nursing schools, we're talking more about this in the schools themselves. And again, I have hope for the generations that are coming through where they're talking about this stuff in the schools where they're being educated. But I mean, basically, I don't think any hospital should tolerate any doctor that doesn't listen, it isn't a good person listening to that nurse or to that mother, that family member. I mean, it just shouldn't be tolerated if a doctor is going to be, a jerk. I mean, I know hospitals that there's zero tolerance for that sort of behavior. Again, I don't know if I did a good job of answering that question, but I think it sort of goes back to, as an individual, here's what you can do. Here's what I can do. Here's what you can do. When you see that mother in that room scared out of her mind, you look her in the eye and you say, are you okay? Do you have other concerns? Hey, don't be afraid to speak up, Yeah.
That was a great answer. Thank you for that. Our last question is somewhat similar to a couple of the other ones in terms of how does provider, hubris, serve as contributors to the system's miscommunication problems?
So say that again, meaning like hubris, pride, ego.
Yeah. Affecting. I think it sounds like it speaks to culture. Yeah. In terms of,
It sounds like there's a theme going on here.
Yeah, I mean, I think it speaks to the importance of your message, I think, overall. And so what I'll do is just on behalf of, again, UCSF Health and our patient safety team, we just really want to thank you for joining us today and your deep dedication and years of commitment to patient safety. Please feel free, just for the audience, to reach out to our team, patient safety at ucsf.edu, with any concerns or questions at any time. What I'm going to do is turn it back to Dr. Van Schaik to close out our session. Thank you, Sorrel, again. It's been an honor. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much for really a very excellent session. So important that you're telling this story, and I appreciate that you joined us for our grand round session. And I wish everybody a lot of patient safety the rest of the week and forever after, and a good rest of their day.
Thanks.
Thank you.